right, hello everyone, and happy Friday. Welcome, Dad. Hey, Rahul, how are you doing?
Doing very well. Super excited. And Jeff, thank you so much for coming in
Of
to
course,
talk to us about S3 Mountpoint.
of course. I was listening to the stream a week or two ago and heard what you had to say, and thought there was a lot more I would be worth discussing and adding to. So happy to be here.
That's
Awesome.
awesome. Thank you so much for taking the time to do this. I'm sure that, also the audience, a lot of people in the audience have a bunch of questions. I got at least two or three other questions that people have asked me over the last 2 weeks. So I'm going to bring them up today. And it'll be great to have this conversation. Um,
And then, welcome everyone in our audience. I was looking at the LinkedIn stream. We've got several people here, so thank you for coming. And yes, please ask any questions that you have. We've got Jeff right here to answer. And let's see. So I think what we should do. Well, actually, I had one other question that I wanted to throw out for the group before we get started, since it shares another common interest. Rahul, what's the vibe in India of the moon landing?
Oh, it's been phenomenal. I think, collectively, it's seen as personal pride of some sort, where get achieving landing on the moon isn't an easy feat, and to do that on a shoestring budget like the ISRO organization has is quite an achievement in itself. So I think everyone just feels incredibly proud of the most recent, Chandrayaan-3 landing.
Well, knowing that there's a space shuttle behind you, Dad, and Rahul, there's a Saturn V behind you, I can definitely
Yes.
think, okay, there's a common interest. So that's really cool.
Yeah, you think about the stack of technologies and education and people that it takes to even contemplate doing something like that. It's incredibly impressive.
Correct. And actually, what is even more impressive when I think about it is instead of doing a direct shot to the moon, because the rockets aren't that powerful and they want to kind of minimize the usage of fuel, the approach that ISRO took both for the Mars mission as well as this one was basically to do a slingshot. So first, you orbit the Earth many, many times, constantly increasing velocity, and then you slingshot onto the moon and then get into the moon's orbit to do the same thing. They did the same with Mars. The math, like every time I think about what math goes into computing with precision, exactly how you're going to execute all of that, it's mind-boggling.
I'm in that same boat where I have no idea how you even go about figuring out how to do something that amazing and to achieve like effectively perfect accuracy within a few meters when you're traveling so far and you've got these like universe scale distances.
Well, and I love that final landing where it hovered at about 150 meters and then ran the final solving algorithm to get a landing spot that was level and wouldn't tip it over on contact. It's really, really neat technology. All right.
Yeah, it's pretty impressive. And they actually the day before, actually on the day of the landing in the morning, every newspaper had a very, very literally the front page had a very detailed plan of exactly what would happen at exactly what time, and to the dot, like everything was executed in exactly those steps. It was really impressive to see that executed with such precision. I mean, it's baffling how you accomplish something like that.
To me, one of the best outcomes of these kinds of amazing, very public achievements is the achievement itself is always awesome, but it's the young people that watch that and they either say, wow, I can do something like that, or I can do something even better, or they're starting to say, how did that happen? And then they start to kind of think and they investigate and they learn and oh, I get this. And even if they don't end up as actual rocket scientists, the journey to that self-improvement and growth and widening your horizons, that's why it's so important to do these kind of things. It's so inspiring for young people, especially, to say, wow, that's so awesome. I sure wish I knew more about that.
Yeah, I completely agree. And the beautiful thing about ISRO is that they actually invite students, they invite kids, they invite college students. You can do an internship there. They have so many programs that just encourage people to learn more and do more. They are making huge strides in getting the private industry involved. in the space program, and they've created a whole lot of incubators and stuff like that. So it's pretty amazing how far they've come in just a couple of decades.
Awesome.
Great.
All right. Well, I wanted to rewind to last week's episode and go to where we were, our thoughts, and kind of set the context. So let's see if this works. I think we have a question to get us started, which is, what is the use case for S3 Mountpoint?
That's a great question. We were scratching our heads about the use cases for it because you really don't want to confuse S3 with a traditional POSIX compatible file system. I think AWS has made a big deal about announcing Mountpoint for S3. I'm still struggling to understand why you would want to load S3 objects like a file system.
I'm curious to know, how it abstracts away things like file system permission. Yeah, I think we'll have to do a bit more exploring of this. All right, that was my attempt at a dream sequence there, a flashback. Thank you.
So I was watching that, and I'm keep reminding myself that I'm on vacation and I'm not supposed to be thinking about any tech, and I shouldn't actually be doing my job. But I'm thinking, I've got some things I'd like to contribute there. So it's awesome to be on your stream today to be able to talk about that.
Sorry, let me get the layout. There we go. All right. Well, so let's set the record straight then. So first of all, what are the main use cases?
Okay, so I talked to the team, and what they told me is that we've got a bunch of customers that have use cases that are effectively either read only or read mostly. And oftentimes these use cases are vast amounts of data. They might be a data lake, or it could be raw data for doing machine learning training. And the customer basically says, I've got this data, it's in S3. It's probably of a size that copying it somewhere else just doesn't make any sense if you just want to process it. And the customers are also telling us, yes, we understand the value of a POSIX compatible file system, but we're reading the data. We don't need to create symbolic links. We don't need links. We don't need to deal with specific permissions. We mostly want to read files at incredible scale, and we want to take advantage of parallelism in really two different ways. The first is that S3 itself is designed for massive parallelism when customers want to access objects. There's definitely an upper limit, but I don't know what the number is. But as many clients as want to read data from S3 at once, we can sustain terabits of reads from S3, if not even higher than that. I don't know what the next number is. Is it petabits, exabits? I don't even know what that number is. We can sustain a lot of data coming out of S3. And so the customers want to be able to, on the read side, they'd like to be able to do things like launch containers or launch EC2 instances, and then take advantage of that parallelism to just inhale data as quickly as possible, and kind of parallel, no pun intended to this. They want to be able to do that economically. So they don't want to copy the data, but they want to be able to get to it as quickly as possible. So one of the real actual requirements for this was let them effectively get the data at S3 speed. So efficiency within the implementation was considered a real top level feature.
Got it. So two things that kind of confused me when I heard some of those specific cases. The first one was, we've had something called S3FS Fuse for a while, which was kind of built to do something similar, but that ended up going the path of creating a whole bunch of POSIX compliant, features, and kind of, I think, had its quiet death. I think there's still some people using it, but by and large kind of ended up in that place. Then when I started looking at the roadmap, which was actually there in the announcement, if you look at a lot of the feature requests over there, they kind of told me that this is going down the same path. Mm-hmm. So were there any insights, or are there any insights about how Mountpoint is different from something like Fuse in terms of the use cases and what we're trying to do over there? And also in terms of roadmap, where does Mountpoint draw the line in terms of differentiating itself from a POSIX compliant file system?
one of the things that the team has decided is that Mountpoint is going to do the things that it can do well and do efficiently. So one thing that was really clear at first is you are limited, so to speak, to the size of a single S3 object, which is 5 terabytes, which is maybe, I don't know if that's actually a real limit or not, but as far as do people deal with terabyte size files? I actually don't know.
Usually they break it up because parsing and scanning is expensive, and unless you kind of figure out a partition for it, you can't do this efficiently.
Right. So basically there is a hard limit that says each of your files can only be a single S3 object. And
Right.
also the other kind of operating kind of decision-making criteria was they wouldn't implement any operations that required some kind of large unbounded number of S3 operations to complete. So the things that they're doing are the things that are efficient and straightforward and generally have a one to few mapping from the request to the file system to what happens underneath. So there's no, like, you can't rename a directory, for example, because in S3 doesn't have that concept. You need to be able to like iterate through an entire key collection, copy the objects, delete the objects. And they said, okay, we simply don't do that. And now one thing maybe we should point out is we do have other file systems. If the customers look at this and say, wow, I really need to, I need more kinds of operations, or I need a different kind of thing that it doesn't do. Well, we've got EFS, we've got FSX for Lustre, but this is the particular thing that a lot of customers asked for, and they one actually kind of getting back to your original question here. Yes, there are existing open source implementations of basically the Linux VFS on top and then S3 on the bottom. But
Right.
customers tried some of those and they said, yep, they've got their strengths and their weaknesses. But they really came and said, this is what the things we want to do are a critical enough part of our use of AWS. We would actually prefer to have something that AWS built and supported. And that was one of the things that I think we heard from customers a number of different times.
Got
And
it.
then from their perspective, this is far preferable, even with its limitations around changing a directory name, say, than starting up an EFS volume, attaching it, and then doing a giant S3 copy, which might in itself cost a lot, or at least take a long time.
Exactly.
And then you maintain 2 parallel data stores that are very difficult to diff, I suppose. Like if you changed one column in a multi-terabyte file, a standard diff might take a long time or might not complete.
Yeah. Now, one thing is I was thinking of when I wrote my blog post, I was actually I always like to think back to my earlier days and kind of think of like what knowledge did I have from like years and decades past, and what did I learn early on that's still useful. And I realized that way back in like I think 1979, I bought my C programming book, my first C programming book.
I have that same book right here.
KR.
In this curtain. Oh
I
yeah.
think I must have spent $12 on this, and I can't even calculate the ROI on the purchase of this book. But that was one of the best like tech investments I ever made. And I actually opened it up, and I found way back in page 160 is this description of like how to use like open and read on files. And I had this really interesting thought that if I bought this book and I learned how to read files and process them, and then I stepped away from the tech world for a really, really long time, and I came back and someone said, well, here's this EC2 instance and here's S3, and I hadn't learned anything in the interim, that knowledge of how to read and process files, I could still use it like 45 years later, which is kind of cool, actually. So
That's true. So just going back to that first part of the question. So if I look at the roadmap link that was actually in the blog post, one of the features that recently got done, that's now in the done state, is support for directories, even though it's actually not even an S3 concept, right? Then
Right.
support for unlink. When I see some features like this that just got implemented, again, it feels like introducing new concepts to match the file system paradigm. My concern, so just putting on my product management hat, my concern is that mixing two paradigms almost never works out well because users invariably will either ask for more features that make it more file system compliant, and there'll be a big pressure to do so. And given that most AWS teams make sure that they are listening to customers and heeding to their demands, this would be one of the cases where the customers are probably going to be wrong asking for it because there's a different file system. Like EFS would serve similar purposes. Yeah, you may not have the same throughput, but if there was an option to work on the throughput of EFS or a similar file system or offer a different object file system that gave you similar throughputs and could be shared in a read-only mode, that makes a ton of sense, right? But mixing the S3 like there are a lot of abstractions like RDS or a whole lot of other services. We all know that they use the S3 paradigm under the hood, right? They put all the data into the S3 fundamental storage. But knowing that this is all your data is fundamentally stored in S3 directly by you and then accessed like a file system somewhere else just feels like a contorted use case where I'm still struggling to kind of wrap my head around it.
So I kind of agree that's contorted, but our customers are actually saying that they want to go through those contortions, and there are customers that have probably built operations around decades worth of tools that know how to basically like walk directory trees and process files. And if customers are saying that's what they want to do, then I think it's reasonable for us to support them. But I also do think that as we do get those roadmap entries, we're sometimes just have to say, you know what, this is a hammer, but what you're asking for is actually like a crowbar, and we're not going to turn the hammer into a crowbar. We're going to have to actually be pretty good at saying this doesn't do what you want. I think what we're going to also see is you look at things like the within that repo, you'll find a really awesome document called semantics, and it tells you very, very clearly how everything that you do at the file level maps to S3. Yeah. And I think being very clear on that and not trying to have this kind of fuzzy layer in between that, okay, like the kind of the trust us layer that says pretend it's files and we're going to do what we can to make it look exactly like files. Having the semantics and saying, you know what, there's a bunch of things it does incredibly well, and here's some things that it can't do because the underlying system doesn't allow that.
Got it.
I'm putting that on the screen. There we go. Oh, here it is. Semantics.markdown.
Yeah, there's some really good info in there. Now, another thing that I've found really interesting about this is that we used a lot of automated reasoning in the development to make sure that we had the corner cases handled properly. I don't know if you've ever had to write low-level code to deal with Unix path names. It's actually a nightmare. There are so many interesting little corner cases, like slash is the root, and it's also a directory. And the number of times you're trying to deal with path names and take them apart and put them back together, there are so many ways to get that wrong. Having gotten it wrong all those times at some point in my career, the use of automated reasoning to make sure that we are properly handling all those corner cases, and that if your you name your object ends with a slash or not, and if it's part of a bucket, or there's more keys inside, there are so many ways that can be. Your code is what I call almost but not quite, and you're pretty sure it works, but you've got that little nagging sense of like, I'm sure it's going to break somewhere. The automated reasoning is one of those tools that we use quite often inside of AWS to give us a lot more confidence that we're doing the right things in the implementation.
And this is what they use in safety critical systems to make sure that every case is detected, right? So this is what prevents your airbag sensor from seg faulting, which would be really unfortunate.
Yeah.
True. I think this is a good time to take a question that we had from one of our audience members on LinkedIn. And this question was sent in a little earlier. Could we bring that one up?
Yep, it is on the ticker.
Great.
Let me try it without the ticker view. That's distracting. Let's try it this way. Is that coming up?
It came up for a second and then disappeared.
Oh, okay. I see what's going on. 1 second here. This is going to, it won't let me edit it. All right, there it is.
Okay.
Got it.
Let me make sure I see the whole thing scroll past here.
So let me try and read it for you, Jeff. So the question is, can I provide folder metadata and mount an S3 bucket? So a legacy Windows workload needing a file and folder hierarchy can now work with S3.
Oh, wow. Okay, so at this point, Mountpoint is specifically for Linux, and so it doesn't currently run on Windows. There's no reason someone couldn't build the equivalent for Windows, and you could probably use the existing code as a pretty good starting point to show you how to access S3. And inside that code, which is written in this awesome language called Rust, it makes use of something called the AWS CRT, the common runtime, which takes care of stuff like the efficient I/O and encryption and so forth. But right now, Mountpoint does not run on Windows.
Yeah.
Issue number 154 in the public roadmap, and I'll put that in the link, is exactly that discussion of when will it run on Windows, and what is stopping it from running on Windows, or what would the use cases be. So that's interesting. I would just put the link in the chat. So if anyone wants to have a look at that, here I'll put it up on the screen as well.
While Stephen is doing that, Jeff, I'm so curious, what kind of workload, like what kind of a real use case requires that amount of data to be analyzed in such massive files? Like, is there a concrete example of a use case that you could discuss?
So the kinds that we've heard from are running data lakes at scale, where you've got a lot of unstructured data. We've heard that machine learning training data, and one that came through that I found interesting was let me exactly remember. It was related to like processing test results from autonomous vehicle operations. I'm not exactly sure why that was one of the mainstream use cases, but that was one that they several times said, oh yes, and autonomous vehicles produce massive amounts of data that our clients want to analyze and understand. So when we talk massive, the model here is that you've got your S3 bucket, and it can deliver lots and lots of data to you. You can get about 100 gigabytes per second per instance using Mountpoint. So as fast as you're able to analyze it, you're going to be able to pull that from S3 and use it. And then, given this was built with performance in mind, this means that if you are spinning up some cluster of 100 or 1,000 instances to do this big job, you're going to be able to do that efficiently, and maybe you're going to be able to be, I don't even know the number, but maybe we're 20% more efficient than some other way to do it. That's 80 or 800 instances versus 100 or 1,000 instances. And that I know that's one of the things we heard from customers as well, is do this as efficiently as possible.
I'd be curious what kind of throughput or what kind of bandwidth do you get out of something like Glue? It is kind of like a managed service, but technically you could write up just the Glue scripts and execute all of these really complicated analysis within Glue itself and let it manage all the compute under the hood.
Right.
I would imagine Glue gets similar, because Glue operates directly natively on S3 itself. So I would imagine Glue has similar bandwidth capabilities against S3.
Agreed. And there are probably many routes to the same solution here. And this is just one that I from hearing from the team, it was just many times over quite a long period of time. And I think if I were to be able to look inside, I'm suspecting that we probably pushed back a little bit on this until it was like, wow, okay, you're all really, really insistent. We can really see that you want this. But then honing down the use case and making sure, let's give you exactly what you want, and let's not do the parts that are effectively impossible to do well, right? So let's do the part that they really want, which is just give us that read mostly access to the files, and say, okay, let's put our energy there. And you can dig into the code. The code's there in all open source. You can dig in and see what it's doing to just maximize the throughput on the connection, versus saying, well, can we do some imperfect job of emulating permissions, and can we somewhat pretend that you can do random seeks and write to the middle of files? Well, no, you can't do either of those really well. So let's just disallow those and focus on the things that it does really well.
Got it.
Now, one interesting thing I've had on my to-do list for a while, just out of just personal interest, was what if you took Mountpoint and then also use it in conjunction with a copy on write file system, like I think it's called bcachefs. Like you could put those two together, and so your reads would come from S3, and then if you were to do writes, those would go effectively to your local file system.
Correct.
Which you could then separately sync to S3. But this might also be kind of a neat tool to understand your workload. Like maybe you've got some scripts you've been running forever that 7 developers ago they built these tools to do some file processing. You're not quite sure if it's read only or read mostly, or it's got a bunch of writes. Well, you could figure that out by using the copy on write file system and getting examining what it actually had to write. Would be kind of an interesting diagnostic tool.
That's an interesting experiment. Yeah. So let me just step back and make sure that we can concretely advise the audience over here. So if I had a choice between S3 Mountpoint and EFS, for example, when would I use S3 Mountpoint, and when would I be advised to use S3 Mountpoint versus EFS and vice versa?
Okay, so EFS is an awesome service, and I like it a lot. I think EFS is going to be great when you only want file-oriented access to your data, and that the ability to have things in S3 and to have URLs that go directly to objects. If you need any of the S3 features, right? If you need the versioning and tagging and so forth, and all those kinds of things. If you need that, and if you have many different kind of types of clients, I could see keeping S3 and then using Mountpoint as just one more way to let some of those kinds of clients get to the data. Okay. EFS is when you are solely file oriented in your access.
Well, I was looking at the EFS numbers, and so EFS, I didn't realize you can only have 128 active users for each client, whereas S3 is obviously well past that. So I suppose if you had a large bucket of lots of files and you wanted to use those across a lot of different clients without having to start managing what files on what volume and then limiting who can connect to what when, I suppose S3 Mountpoint would be a much better choice of not having to deal with that. I didn't realize, though, that EFS can support a file up to 50 terabytes in size. I have no idea why you'd want to use that, but that's... Can you ask about that one?
Logs.
Who has a 50 terabyte or a 40 terabyte file?
Or what mistakes did you make in your design that led you to having 50 terabyte files?
I'm guessing it's all logs.
Always seems fast, and IO seems fast, and disk always seems fast until you start having to deal with like even gigabytes and petabytes, and you like enter a copy command, and it's like, okay, now it's time for lunch break, and you suddenly realize that these things that big files are actually still big files.
True.
I just set up my NAS yesterday, and even just moving, a couple of terabytes around between the previous solution, it takes a long time.
Yeah.
And you can tell exactly where the limiting factors were. In my case, it was actually the write speed.
Yeah. So Stephen, you're in the mode of like maximizing your hardware, and I'm in the mode of like minimizing my hardware. So
yeah, I think I'll have to show you my setup. It's my desk is getting a bit crowded. I need to get a rack.
Oh, jeez. Oh, really?
Well,
because I gave one away a couple months ago. Actually,
I remember that one. That would have been useful.
Was that the one that you discovered in the wall?
Exactly.
Awesome.
I bought some 80/20 and I'm going to 3D print some brackets for it to in order to make a kind of a custom little shelf for.
Oh wow! Okay.
So that'll be fun. I'll share you a CAD file.
Nice.
Awesome. All right. Thank you so much, Jeff, for coming and clarifying and having this wonderful conversation about Mountpoint. This is definitely enlightening and
definitely fun.
Clarified a whole lot of things for me.
Great. All right, I am going to get ready for my next stream. I'm doing AWS on Air in 90 minutes. I got the news segment kind of planned for that, so I got to get that to be happening.
So we catch that on Twitch?
On Twitch, yes. Twitch and LinkedIn.
Great.
Awesome.
All
Thank
right.
you so much, Jeff.
My pleasure. Good to see you both.
Bye.
Bye-bye.